Okay, everyone, welcome to the meeting. Those online, these chairs are incredibly noisy. And then those in the room, really appreciate you joining us for what's become a annual tradition, our season ending debrief meeting where we look at the season that we just concluded and then also look ahead a little bit to next year, 2025. So I'm going to start with a few opening remarks and then turn it over to Chris for a couple sections. If Matt Pandera makes it here in time, then we'll also hear from Matt, and then we'll carry on. So there's the agenda. I guess, trust me, we'll follow it. So, all right, so as I said, welcome. I want to say what a year. I think we've had big events, meaningful events this season, and a lot of smaller fun events. The big event highlights for me involve big efforts and commitments by many of you. At long last, the Grand Tactical at Sackets Harbor occurred, and then the change of command ceremony at Port Erie. So they were all excellent. So thank you very much. I tried to be as present as possible, having had 18 different events or activities since this meeting last year. It was wonderful seeing the return of the 41st Spring Gala and also the Bacchus Mill event. I think we've missed them from being on our schedule. I was thrilled to at long last attend the Dunvegan event. What an excellent event, a beautiful site. I think the one thing that stood out to me, it's a reinforcement from something last year, and that is all the work that's gone into establishing a universal drill standard for the infantry. Very much seen a plug and play when we combine people work together seamlessly, and I've heard a lot of positive feedback. And I know on the artillery side, that's also something that they've worked really hard at with a lot of drill and then using extra people to augment undermanned gun crews. So it's very good to see all of that in play. A lot of appreciation goes out to the event planners, the unit and gun commanders, and also the collaborative relationship that we have and continue to build on with the Navy. And then finally, I'd like to thank our staff. Their work and time commitments goes far beyond what you see at events, and I really appreciate their professionalism, dedication, and the incredible knowledge base they bring forward to all of our benefits. So thank you very much. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk about what our org structure looks like for staff. I think it's really nice to see this kind of fill out the season. So Chris.
Thank you. I'm going to stand up and try not to make too much noise as I do that. So this is, it says effective February 1st, 2024. So it hasn't really changed that much in the last 10 months. We'll get to changes in just a second. But the one thing we want to highlight, I think we talked about this last year, is that we've really, under Tom and Matt, we've really got two parallel structures now. It used to be really a heavy emphasis on just the infantry, right? But now we like to see it as this is two separate structures under Tom. Matt and I are sort of in parallel there as the command infantry and artillery commander, and then we've got our various staffs flowing down. So at this point, I'm going to, I hope not shock Ewan by turning it over to Ewan really briefly, and then he's going to jump it back to me in a minute.
So as some of you may already know, next year will be my last year in the role of Sergeant Major. I feel incredibly blessed and fortunate to have been able to serve the hobby for the time that I've been in the role. It's been a fantastic experience getting to work with all the units, the commandos, the NCOs, and the men. But where I am right now with my family, I think this is the best decision on a personal level. And although I'll miss the challenges and opportunities that the role has presented, I think this is a great opportunity to bring somebody else into the role and continue sort of succession planning when it comes to the hobby as a whole. And bring a fresh face and maybe some vim and vigor into the staff to propel us forward into the next decade.
Thank you.
3 cheers for you and hip hip huzzah! Hip hip huzzah! Hip hip huzzah!
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead. So just for the record, since he enjoys the attention so much, I just wanted to thank Ewan for his guidance and his assistance. I know that every single unit has experienced his one-on-one attention and help. And I know for our unit, we wouldn't even exist if it weren't for Ewan, who got us started all those years ago. And just the bar, I know it sounds cliche, but not only is he tall, but he's raised the bar above his height as far as the next RSM, who I'm sure is gonna be spectacular, but I can't thank him enough for making the hobby not just enjoyable, but for being what it is today with regards to the comportment and the abilities of the different units. So thank you again, Ewan.
Here.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody, like, to sort of paraphrase or steal your words here, everybody here has benefited from Ewan's leadership in some way, and that goes for everybody on the staff as well. So the important thing to emphasize is Ewan's not going anywhere. We won't let him. This next year we're going to consider it a transition year. So I want to talk a little bit about the process of looking for a new sergeant major. But ideally, we would like to have that person in place by NCO school next April, in whatever that is, 5 months, 6 months. And then we've got a year for Ewan to kind of take that person under his wing and help them grow into the role. So the process is going to be very similar to a year and a half ago, when we were looking for a new ADC and a new lieutenant colonel. The major difference this time will, of course, be that you don't have to be an officer. We asked you to have experience in the role to apply for lieutenant colonel. But that for sergeant major, we're looking for experience as an officer. That's an option, or as an NCO. So you can be currently in that role, or maybe you did that 10 years ago and you stepped down. So anybody in those roles. Similarly, we're asking for kind of that nomination process. So maybe that's overstating it, but we want you to, if you're an NCO, you've run that past your commanding officer, right? If we contact them, it doesn't come as a surprise to them. And similarly, if you're an officer, right, maybe you've spoken to your sergeant, or you've spoken to the head of your, if you've got an organization.
I'm sorry to the online guys. There we go. You're seeing funny things with the camera.
Get you a steady cam there.
It's just Chris.
I'm hilarious. My wife thinks I'm hilarious. So those, I should say, all this is going to go out in writing. Colin's going to send it out in the next few days, depending on his schedule. So if you've forgotten all these timelines, that's fine. We are going to close the call for applicants on January 31st in the new year. We will be having a staff meeting shortly after that. And so that's going to be where we sort of discuss next steps. We've left next steps a little bit open, right? It may involve interviews, right? We don't know. It'll depend on how many candidates we get. But we'll see what the next step is. And I should mention, if you have any questions about, or you want to put your name forward, that's going to go through Colin as well. So that'll be part of his email that he sends out next week. So the thing I really want to highlight, and Ewan and Colin and I really want to highlight about this role is, first off, we really want people to think about, don't be afraid to put your name in. If we get 7 or 8 applicants, okay, so it's only gonna go to one person. But it's really important for us on the staff to know that people are interested in doing something other than, just being with their unit, right? Like that kind of gives us an idea. Ewan, and I know the theme later will be succession planning, but that gives us an idea of people that we can draw on that want to do something. And there are lots of people that don't, but that sort of gives us that idea. The other thing is, part of what Colin's going to send out next week is going to be a little bit like a job application, kind of the qualifications or the qualities we're looking for in a person. And this is something we've really talked extensively about, that we want to emphasize, that Ewan has really made this job about more than just the drill. So there are qualities we're looking for. We've got a list. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but to give you an idea, we're looking for somebody that can effectively communicate, right? Ewan's in constant communication with sort of his other NCOs. We're looking for somebody with interpersonal skills that's related to the communication, but also problem-solving skills. Lots of people come to Ewan with their problems first, right? They don't, well, I mean, lots of the NCOs, they'll go through their unit first, but if there are larger problems, maybe it's a safety issue or something, lots of people come to Ewan first. So that problem solving, detail-oriented, humility, and lead by example. So I think that's something Greg mentioned earlier. So we really want to emphasize that the person we're looking for isn't necessarily, doesn't have 48 drill manuals at their command, right? And knows every minute, right? The drill can be taught, but we're looking for that personality. Because that's, I mean, if you don't have that personality, you don't get along with people, right? That's not something we can teach, but Ewan's got a year to help you get the drill under your belt. So
That, and then the adjutant's an ongoing resource. He has the 48 different drill manuals, right, and can help the sergeant major with that, so.
yeah, so so
You got it.
we're there, right? We think of the staff as a team. So we're looking for somebody that's gonna fit into that team, but then is gonna work really well with all of you guys as well. And so I think if you're thinking, well, I'm just a corporal in my unit, I've never commanded a battalion before. Well, neither had any of the rest of us until our first time, right? So don't be afraid to put your name in, because we're not looking for perfection on day one with the drill manual. It's kind of what I'm trying to emphasize. So I'm going to pause for a second, open it up to questions. I assume Tom's monitoring anything online if that comes forward, but any questions? We will of course make a motion in Parliament, move thanks to Ewan. That will come later, but he's not going anywhere for a year.
I had, when you mentioned 48 drill manuals, if you have 47, is that okay?
Yes, we will find you the one you're missing, don't worry, yeah.
Sentiments of 1768 paragraph.
Yeah, I know what's
The militia manual, it doesn't count.
Look, if I don't have it, Greg does, right?
Yeah. Okay, Tom, nothing online?
No, other than some expressions of appreciation for everything Ewan did in the role.
Yeah, a bit of a love fest, we don't need to.
Chris said, not striving for perfection. Lord knows I'm still looking for it and far ways from achieving it, so. You know what, we're part-timers, right, or hobbyists, so I think the best quality is a willingness to put yourself forward and to try, that's all we can ask. All right, so, I went the wrong direction. Chris will carry on with this, the debrief, so Chris.
Yeah, so this one, I'm hoping this comes a lot more from you, a lot less of me talking. But we do this every event, right? After every battle, a brief debrief. And then sometimes even Sunday afternoon, what worked, what didn't work for the event, but let's look at the whole season. I'm gonna suggest maybe we can, if we want to say something specific about the GT, you're welcome to bring it up now, but we've also got another section for the GT if you want to save it for later, but, what worked, what didn't work, what should we change, were there massive complaints or were there?
Or what can we do more of? Right,
Yeah, more GTs, I would say, but that's just me.
gin and tonic.
Yeah. I don't like gin, no.
Oh, no.
Sorry, friend. Gin is
I
made
still
from
like it.
juniper groups.
Yeah.
Plants, it's disgusting. That's it, everything was brilliant, we don't need to do anything, nothing different. Uh-oh. Laura recognizes Mr. Flowers.
Is that as legal counsel or drum major?
No, we'll deal with that later. The drums would like to be involved a bit more in the kinds of things that drummers during our period did on the field, which was to help to assist those that are wounded back behind the lines. And so what would be helpful for us is that if you could convey to your units that when somebody takes a casualty, they're not always dead. That they have an ability to be helped back behind the lines. And I will send out the necessary people to help them do that.
Or tended to and recycled so that you can rejoin the fray.
Sure.
Sometimes we're supposed to win a scenario and we're taking way too many casualties and it's becomes not plausible, right? So. Go ahead, Greg.
I was gonna build on that. I don't have anything to add about the GT because I wasn't here. However, I think that whatever we could do to.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries. Whatever we can do to create more animation on the field, for want of a better word, is fantastic. I think that's a great idea. I don't know how far we're willing to take it. I mean, I know the drum major is also responsible for the lashes, am I right? So I could call on you for that if I ever need to discipline with my guys. I'll be
Yeah,
happy to
I'll
do
bring it.
that.
I have a cat. I will bring it.
Okay, but I mean, I think that's great. What we were looking at Bradley was to try and incorporate more of the camp followers into the event as well. To be able to kind of go through the kind of pick up the dead soldiers' belongings of the opposite side and stuff. I mean, obviously there are considerations, but I think that's a good start. Just more for the public to see from the perspective of the audience, because that's not a bad thing at all to be playing to them. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I think this goes without saying for the people in the room, but just don't forget, we want to keep it respectful, right? Yes, there were, people stealing shoes and that sort of thing, and just, make sure we're not turning it into a goof fest. Like I said, everybody in this room, I think, knows we've had these conversations before, and everybody knows what we're going for, but just to reiterate that. Okay, thanks, guys. Anything else? That's a maybe.
There's some
Maybe.
online, let's see. Jonah, we also have a lot of civilians not interested in carrying a musket, be open to helping in a similar role, maybe carrying water. So we can look at that. I think we just have to watch. Number one, the age, you gotta be at least 16 to be on the field. And then also the traffic, we gotta be careful, we don't have too many people because we've had scenarios where part of our group have wandered in front of guns and that we gotta be very conscious of the safety cones. So I think if there's civilians and maybe we're gonna have to work out some kind of safety training for them. I'm hesitant to just carte blanche allow civilians on the field.
I also remember, this is going back probably 20 years, but I remember there became, when civilians would carry water on the field, it became less of an emphasis on people carrying their own water, right? So I don't need a canteen, somebody will bring me water. That's problematic. So we would just have to be really careful to make sure that would be an additional, right, not instead of you carrying a canteen.
Just to kind of follow up on what I raised earlier is that if we're going to help to assist wounded back to a particular place, it would be nice to have those that are portraying surgeons out on the field as well, so that we could actually take them back to a specific spot.
Agreed, our surgeon often comes out on the field with us and helps us recycle.
Okay.
People out there, so, yeah, and we've had drummers out there with us, when they come out alone, and, training on, don't just stand there, you're going to die, run around and pick things up. And I think it really adds to the show for everybody who's involved.
Good.
Because obviously if someone died, no one would not look. Like someone is always gonna check anyway, so it's neat to have different people moving around the field. Especially when you guys are, you just kind of stand there and just targets.
So in the spirit of animation, it's also appropriate for an officer or a sergeant to look to someone that fell. And then Ross, if you guys are serious about doing it.
Yep, absolutely.
Then they can turn to the drums and ask for help.
Yep.
But I just don't want all the drums are thinking about choreographing their next song and then no one comes to their aid, so.
Yep.
Either you're in or you're not.
Excuse me, we're in. Obviously, we need to work out with, people in advance about how we're gonna communicate on the field. But no, absolutely, we're in.
You ever have a drum major whistle?
No, but I,
Specific call?
you know what I do have? I have a haggis whistle.
I've been looking at the wrong impression.
Oh,
Last thing we need is a herd of haggis on.
All right, Dave,
So, last week we had our mess dinner down in Kingston. And it came up in light of the recent election in the rebellious provinces. We now have members who said they won't go to events in states anymore. And in the last Trump administration, we had the same thing. With people who said, I won't cross the border, I will no longer go to events in New York or wherever.
we've, yes. At large, we had that, but it also persisted through the administration in between, and then people, we never make people do anything they don't want to do. Right, so then my mindset is I look to the events I support in the US. Routinely, I will do River Raisin every year. And then Mississinawa, I miss it, Fort Meigs. But I go concerns aside because I have friends there. I want to support their event and I want to support them because they consistently support us at our Canadian events. I think it's just a balance, right? People have their level of comfort. You have to respect that. Just like when we started coming back from COVID, it was people's personal choice, it's not making it, you can't make anyone do something they don't want to do, right? And so their safety or whatever it is that's their first priority, so.
Yeah, we gotta acknowledge that's a tough choice, right? And I think all of us are, like Tom said, balance that, we all weigh it. But at the end of the day, it's a tough choice for all of us, and if that's the way people decide to go, well, fair enough. We'll miss them, but fair enough.
But jumping ahead a bit, when I look to the Grand Tactical we had at Sackix Harbor, routinely, we've had trouble getting Canadians across the border to support US-based event. And I thought we had a marvelous turnout there. I was extremely pleased with the representation we pulled off, so. And then we're back to mixing and matching, combining units with the universal drill standard, right? So we have a US-based event, we're under strength. Quite frankly, I'm used to it. At River Raisin, Fort Meigs, we generally don't see a whole lot of Canadians turning up at those events, so. It's something we'll continue to work through.
I know, hi, Matt. Just thought I'd catch you up. So we're just kind of in the middle of the debrief, but I thought I'd highlight, is there anything we want to talk about safety related? So Matt, I know you and your guns, sometimes you have stuff you want to bring up. So I thought I'd put the call out. Is there anything safety related anybody wants to bring up? I'm not putting you on the spot, Matt. You got your own thing to talk about in a minute, so you're.
No, but I think that's where the debrief has worked well, right, at events. And then also, sites have gotten into the rhythm of that too, so their safety people have been coming to our debrief meetings and having the opportunity to talk about concerns, so I think there was a couple encroachments on cones and then but we get really good feedback either in the moment or right after, and we'll continue to work on that, right? So when there are issues, I think a lot of it comes from the guns moving, because then the cone is constantly shifting and changing. But I also respect, the guns, they view movement as a good opportunity to consume some of the 5-minute downtime they have because of the safety rules, right? So it keeps them occupied, helps tie up some of that time. And then at large, for the benefit of the public, any kind of movement on the field, when we talk about tending to casualties, it helps animate what's going on out there, so. Yep,
I think that's just another responsibility of the unit commanders as well, to be looking around and constantly judging this shifting situation. I mean, we're not looking around to see if the cannon's moving, then we're not fully doing our job, and we're not depending on our NCOs to do a lot of the other work.
good one. I might take that, leaders lead.
I might have screwed up a few times, so I'm just going from there.
Yeah, it's all of our jobs together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
So just from a point of view, our unit tends to support the US side. We tend to get moved around a lot. And I just wanted to note that after last year's discussion about the reorganization of the guns and the communication thing, we noticed that things were a lot easier to decipher. We didn't find ourselves in a particular situation going, oh crap. We did find ourselves in a couple of situations where we thought, well, this is gonna be cool. But it was never an oh crap moment this past year. And I think that relates to everything that was done at the officers meeting and this organizational thing. I can't point out specific things. I can just tell you that the guys did notice that when we were in camp towards the end of the year. And I noticed that because I'm generally the guy who looks around and goes, are we supposed to be here? So, anyways, whatever happened, it worked.
Well, and I
really
have
well.
to absolutely agree, not being a gun person, like, I mean, I did not grow up as a boy, I did not shoot things from, like squirrels and stuff from little kidness. I don't have all 28 drill manuals memorized, including the
It was
naval
48.
one.
Point of order. It was
Also really
48.
not good at math, so, I found it very beneficial at the last NCO school where you guys taught us.
Yeah.
If they look like that,
Yeah.
don't go in front of them.
Yeah.
If they look like that, it's okay. And like telling me 50 meters is the cone. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Like, cause I don't have a math brain, I can't triangulate in my head or anything, so. Having everybody in the unit know that this means not, or this means do not, is very, very good. And like, a few of my guys pointed things out to me this year. Like, oh, hang on a second, okay, now go. So like, I think it's great that we're bringing the naval and the cannon stuff into it, because we were at an event a couple of years ago and I was commanding the battalion. I was like, I don't know if they're loaded or not. He's like, well, they're doing this, and it means nothing to me. So it's good.
Yeah, so kudos to the artillery,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And kudos to the senior staff that are really trying to bring that together. So,
Is it maybe worthwhile to do that, a kind of a refresher at the next school of the officer?
we will certainly have both infantry and artillery there, and we'll be working together at some point.
And then remember the YouTube channel,
Yes.
because there is a specific video around the guns, how they operate and signal. So you can use that as your own refresher or share it out with your unit so that they know.
So a couple safety things that we a little bit started pre-COVID and then kind of got put by the wayside. So one of them is, you may remember there used to be a fire bell. It got lost in the world that is historical twist. It is,
Because I stole it.
it lives in my trailer now, so it will
Is that
start
where it
becoming to
is?
events again.
All right, right.
I don't know, we'll have to look at the schedule. I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to do a fire drill. I remember way back in 2018, we did that and we had some ideas and when there were some things we need to build on. And then sort of the world shut down. So hopefully we'll be able to incorporate that at some event again and look back on those ideas and add some stuff. And then the other one was all the way back to 2016, at Waterloo. Some of you remember the ping pong paddles, with the red cross on them. And that, I think we had 2 of them made up and then well, I mean, one's lived in my haversack ever since, but we sort of didn't really follow up on any of those things. So that's a couple of safety things that I would like to.
Did you want me to make some more?
Well, I still have mine.
I would, yes, Ross, it doesn't hurt to have multiples around. I might have the other one in my box, but it'd be good to have multiples.
How many more do you want?
Well, and it's nice to see that we're taking an old first aid kit onto the field
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well as the AEDs when they're available. Cause I know some of the was fast, so having that stuff available and personnel who are capable of deploying more than a Band-Aid on the field is always been helpful. We always have somebody to look to, who has more knowledge than the average Joe, so.
Yeah, so that, we do have a staff first aid kit, in case anybody's just reminding what Jackie just said. Usually that lives with ADC ball, because I got sick of carrying it.
He's
It's
got the
really
fancy
great and
bag.
heavy. But some, like at Fort Erie, often they have one of their site guys as a safety guy, so we give it to them. But it's always on the field behind the lines and it's a black bag, you can always look for it. Ideally, sorry, you would give me a quick second. I would love to see, I know, Mark, you guys have an AED that you take on the field. I would ideally love to get one, a staff one that we can make Scott carry around as well. But
It's rubber.
he's got 6 months to start doing leg workouts. So that ideally, I would love to see that, but certainly for next year, we'll keep the first aid kit out there. You and then Greg.
I was just gonna say too, last year with the Grand Tactical, I really appreciated how we had I always still associate them as the 40 team who was able to be at the Grand Tactical to assist when it came to health and safety on the field. So that would have been Stony, Grand Tactical and 40. They were active. If I'm missing an event, let me know. But it's nice to have these consistent fellows that we've known for decades being willing and able to come now to more events outside of the ones they've traditionally gone to, and having those extra set of eyes to help when it comes to, again, health and safety.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard sell saying to guys, hey, you want to come to a reenactment and just be a safety guy and stand on a field? But it is
It's a good
really
first
good
step
at
to
that.
get on the field if you're, you know.
Yeah.
You want that experience and you're too kind of gun shy. That's a good first kind of exposure. You're on the field.
That's why you joined the drums.
That's another good thing. I don't know. I think I'm wearing my teacher, father, commander
So
hat
this
right
is
now,
only
but
allowed to recruit during camp. It's limited to camp.
during the haggis time. I think Tom, you and I had this discussion. First of all, I think it's incumbent upon the individual reenactors to assess their own kind of capabilities before going out to the field. And I think it's also the commanders being able to look and go, I don't think you're going to be able to do well out there today. I think it's a lot of responsibility has to come down to the unit level to avoid the need for Scott coming around with this fancy little round bag there. And I think that maybe that might be another thing that we can remind the commanders about to transmit it down to the.
We have a section to discuss
Yeah,
that.
right on.
So,
I thought so.
I should probably mention that bag was courtesy of Parks Canada. So thank you to Parks Canada. That was Scott Finley made the bag,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Pete
Yeah,
Martin
here.
stocked it. So huge thank you to Parks Canada for that.
North Air General will probably restock it.
Yeah, I'm not I'm sure they, anybody at Parks Canada knows that.
Is that historically accurate?
I mean, it's
It's
based on.
cool,
a
it
port-
passes, right? I'm just
It's
curious.
based on a portmanteau, so
Yeah, yeah.
it, I mean, certainly. the style tag
Accurate
is-
from a luggage perspective.
Yeah.
It's leather. It's
Yeah.
all good.
Anything else for the good of the cause for debrief from the season? Lots of these themes will come back up, right? So if you think of something later, go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, for a number of years, people in my regiment, my team, the hobbits, we've been concerned about the ladder situation.
Bruce, can you speak up for the benefit of the online people?
For the last couple of years, people in my group have been concerned over the ladder situation at Fort Erie. And
That's just
we
a
think,
speaker.
I think I have some suggestions about what might improve this. So what I did was I spoke briefly, conversationally with Aaron, who's the site manager, suggesting that I'd be willing to put some specs together and some recommendations about what might be better and run them by you gentlemen before they go to her, so they go through the channels correctly and see where that might go. She didn't say that was a terrible idea. She thought that's a good idea. So this simply has to do with distance between rungs, ratio of foot of the ladder to the wall, which is basically 1:4, that kind of thing, and the plate and the resultant placement. Because if you place it too far out, you're not crawling up, you're crawling across, and everything's falling down. That's not good.
I had
not
a
good
couple of
for
guys
strength,
say the
pardon
same thing. I had a couple of guys say the same
Yeah.
thing about the wrong place.
Right. So I have a tentative plan for a ladder that I'm willing to construct, show them and see if they think that's reasonable. I also touched base with Lawrence, I can't remember his last name, used to be with the 104th from Stony Creek. He's a retired fire chief captain. So I
He's
spoke
with
with him.
the community volunteers now?
Yes, correct. And
Gosh,
so he was in accordance with this, thought it was a good idea,
the Canadian
and-
Volunteers.
lent his support to the concept. I'll try and get that done and run it through you guys first.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I haven't been on the ladders in probably a decade, so, yeah, I appreciate that. It's,
Well, some of us can't get to the first run.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might need a boost to the first one.
so they would make my specs where they, I think you and I designed them, didn't we? So I don't know what your problem is, guys. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, this just goes back to, we can't be everywhere and see everything. So, yeah, it really helps having you guys having eyes on the field too. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Did you decide to crawl out of your hole in the ground?
That's right.
For 11.
Get the Navy to construct.
They need
a
a couple
derrick,
of rocks.
Anything else?
Birch over there.
Sorry, Greg.
No problem. I don't know if this is still a big deal with everyone else. It is with me. It kind of connects what we were saying before about being respectful on the field. I'm not entirely convinced people are like dying as respectfully as they should be still. I mean that not that they're being all silly and kind of thing, but people are dying and then they're kind of looking up like this and they're kind of trying to get comfortable and it's looking so obvious. And I'm just kind of like, just lay down and don't move. Find a nice, comfortable place to die and to stay that way. Or
If
get
you're not
rescued.
comfortable, get the
Or
drums
get,
over to-
exactly, if your gun's not working, your muscet's not working and you need a break, just fall down and maybe. Indicate to whoever an NCO or something that, hey, I want to be taken off the field and that can happen, because I'm seeing it, not a ton of people, but enough people to do that, that's kind of irritating. And then the other thing is, just all the chatter in the line, there's a lot of little goofing around and stuff, and every once in a while, I do it too. But there's a time and a place, I think there's a little too much chatter when we should be kind of marching out. There's a time and place kind of thing. So I personally would like to see a little less silliness and goofing around, especially when we're walking past the audience. This kind of, I think it's respectful just to kind of not be goofing off if we're going out to fight a war.
Yes, time and a place. Yes, kind of the key words. Yeah, so we'll maybe we'll make a note for that. We'll bring it up again at NCO school and just sort of reiterate it again with the guys, because again, I know we're a little bit preaching to the choir here, right? We all know the message, but it's sort of disseminating that is important. So,
Well,
yeah, thanks.
you've got to watch. A lot of times we'll all nod in agreement. but then it never leaves the table.
Yeah.
Right, like unit commanders gotta bring that back to their units and make sure. I don't know how many people are taking notes, I would hope they have a recap or report that they're gonna give to their units, along with the onerous 2-hour recording. If they really wanna see all the minutia, then they're welcome to do it, so.
Yeah.
Good, appreciate the dialogues.
Online,
Slow starting, but then you guys picked up a lot of steam.
anything online?
No, I covered it off, or brought it forward.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, so at this point, let's see, some highlights. We had a very good season. We're going to go to two kind of brigade commanders that report up to me. So Matt, if you want to cover off your 2024 season, and then the 2025, we'll capture that in training goals a little bit later on.
I apologize, I've been a little busy the last few weeks, so I kind of threw this together last night. I think I've missed a couple of groups in here, but I overall participation by the guns sanctioned events, concourse events, was pretty good overall. It did have its share of challenges for us this year, though. My command structure, including myself, we had 3 of us all having different surgeries and for different reasons at one time. So I know I couldn't. I'm the only one that can pull the gun for the Nancy's at the last 20 years. So if I can't make an event, a lot of times the gun doesn't make it. So, but with the crews getting together a lot more often now and sharing of crews and whatnot, that doesn't necessarily mean a crew can't make it there. It's just they have to fall in with another gun. But regardless, it was still a challenge in that respect. So some of the other sort of structural things I wanted to do as far as the running of the guns, like my staff, so to speak, didn't come as far to fruition as I would have liked, because like for instance, Joe Chasen, when he finally made it to the field, he didn't make it to basically even to 11 o'clock that morning. It was very hot, and I believe that was at Fort Erie, and he basically collapsed, so they had to take him away. So he was very disappointed because of open heart surgery and then his knee surgery this past summer. He basically had 2 seasons straight that he hasn't participated. So with that kind of put a bit of a damper on our 6-pounder making it to a number of events. So they didn't make it out quite as much, yeah, things like that. The other issue was this year with we all felt the cost of black powder go up past year, and I know I did infantry for years, and you can regulate your rounds, and if you have a commander that knows how to do good firing, so to speak, you're 15 rounds or 20 rounds in a musket, you can get a good hour out there and whatnot. And even with the guns at 5-minute intervals, the cost of powder right now is unbelievable, right? Like we buy it by the case, and it's $988 for 25 pounds of 1 ounce powder. That's basically it's $35 plus tax or whatever for a pound of powder now. So if you got through the last year or something on your reserve powder, when you go to buy a case of powder this year, be ready. Have the smelling salts ready. So basically, even with the Nancy gun, for instance, our bore's a little bigger than some of the other Zabo barrels or whatnot, but our minimum size of a round we can fire is 3 ounces. Because you need that conical shape, slight shape to your round, otherwise it's tumbling in the barrel and it can tear and whatnot. So that's about $8 a shot now. So gun crews are finding they have no choice but to start looking at doing small little events here and there to try and make some money, because it's very expensive. It's phenomenal how much it costs to fire a cannon now. So I feel for the 6-pounder, because that means they're
8 ounces a shot.
8 ounces times So you're like $18 a shot.
Yeah.
You're $18 a shot with that gun. So 5 minutes per shot's okay now. So we really need to move around and keep things going. So that's the two, that was this past year, that was our two main hurdles, was basically true medical conditions and whatnot. And the phenomenal cost of just running the gun. Just, you know, so that was our two main headaches this past year. Other than that, what we had talked about, discussed, and did a small presentation at the NCO school at Fort George earlier this season. I think you touched on that. Right, stuff was educating the infantry on the guns and different signs of what we do. Has helped, I think, the idea and the other natives that are a little less structured on the field and moving around. Now the visuals help, and part of the training in the artillery camp now is you don't just get stripes or epaulets, you get responsibilities with that, and that's part of it. When you're on the field, yeah, you're running a gun, you're doing what you normally do, but at the same time, you're in constant communication with the other artillery people and the infantry. And the site staff. We always have site staff with us when we're at the big events. Small events, when we don't, we implement the same thing, just without site staff. So if that's been a help to make the infantry's maneuvering on the field run more smoothly, then that's great. And that allows our guns to move a little bit. I'm not the only one that needs to be communicated. There's options now. There's subalterns on the field that are getting better and better as we move along. It's not a question that they don't know how to do it. It's just they've never had that responsibility before, which is kind of like a little bit of a share of authority, you know. And so we're trying to build on that. So you get NCOs on the artillery line that are confident. They have confidence. They don't have to turn around all the time and ask Matt, you know, or ask James what. They know the job. This is what they're doing. So a sergeant there will have the proper answer for you. That helps. So, and that's about all I had for that right now. We touched on safety, and I'm pushing to always make sure that the gun crews have the safety kits, and we have at least a couple of fire extinguishers out there on the field in our limbers.
And water too, right?
And we have, usually there's lots of water in the limbers, yeah. So if you're desperate, if you're an infantry command or something like that, and I mean, there's hot weekends, that's the biggest thing we're facing, I think, right? Is heat stroke. So we usually have water, so that's available to anybody.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to mostly reserve what I was going to say, sort of penny packet it out. I know we're going to talk about the GT, we're going to talk about training goals, right? All that sort of stuff. So all these things are going to kind of fit into those categories a little bit better. But I just briefly, I wanted to say a big thank you to everybody, especially the people in this room and the people online. This year was a huge learning curve, and I think I probably speak for Tom as well, and a little bit Scott, right? We had several of us new in our new roles on the staff, and it's been fantastic, right? Within the staff, but without the staff, everybody here and online has been incredibly supportive and very patient, right? We're learning a new job, right? And that's a lot. So I really appreciated everybody's support. And also the support with the goals that we sort of established this time last year and the beginning of the year. I was pretty blown away. You know, the vehicle calls were a little bit my baby. And boy, that poor bugler, I ran him ragged some events, but you know, it was
He deserves
great.
it.
at the beginning of the year, Longwoods and even Stony Creek, Tracy would be blowing a bugle call and people would be kind of staring at me, looking for some sort of. And then, by the end, Fort Erie, we were doing stuff and people were just responding and it was fantastic. And then our other training goal was just rebuilding that battalion level maneuver. And we really came a long way this year. And I think it really showed at our change of command ceremony. I thought we all looked great. Now I had my back to you most of the time, but from my perspective, it looked great. Really appreciate everybody's hard work. It looked great out there. And of course that goes for Colin and you, but you guys, and then right down to your people on the field, it all looked really good. So just overall, like I say, I want to reserve a lot of things, but just overall, a huge thank you for all your work and all your support this year. And that's it. Thank you. And I think over to Tom.
Yes.
Hi, Colin.
Who's that?
Oh God, he's never gonna look
You notice you're shooting him in the back, right?
They're all coming from behind.
So we're not gonna call upon Colin to speak, but I think that's the most epic photo from the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard you see an officer actually getting fragged.
So it's in denial.
All right, Grand Tactical, I think I've been using this slide for a number of years now, but why have one? So aspirationally, a large scale event for both Crown Forces and the US. So, we really hope everyone tries to attend the Grand Tactical so you can have something big, special, and then into the second point, hopefully an interesting event where possible at a unique site. And then the last point, when it is possible to have an event where both naval and land elements can work together. It's not always going to happen. And I know Tom Hurlbut told me to quit trying, like he appreciates that it can't be at every event, but and they're doing a lot of work to also create land elements too, so they can participate in future big events if there isn't a naval component. So this year, I mentioned earlier, at long last, I think after trying for 5 years, we had the Grand Tactical at Sackets Harbor. I was really pleased with the feedback, the number of people that had never been there before and how much they enjoyed the community. And then the terrain that we had to play with, it was disappointing not to be able to have the landing, but the site kiboshed that, I guess. The acquisition of that farmland in between hasn't been consumed as quickly as, or consummated as quickly as we had hoped. So I didn't know until we doing the walkthrough Friday morning that we couldn't. But we'll come back to this. I think the land we had to play with was more than enough and actually too much for a number of people. I'm afraid what would have happened if we had used all of that terrain that morning. And then you can see by the photo, difficult to move through, but probably one of the more realistic environments we would have had, to do a battle scenario in, right? It's in 1812, 1314, I don't think they had too many golf course quality manicured lawns to play on, so.
No different than Waterloo.
Yeah. So I think a great event, lots of great feedback. Once again, I'll express on Connie's behalf. She was dealing with a lot of personal stuff and probably couldn't be as present as she could have been. She had an elderly mother that health took a bad turn and in fact passed away a few days after the event, but Connie was thrilled with the deployment of all the groups and the quality of event, and she got a lot of great feedback from the community as well. So after all that waiting, I thought a very, very good event. So
Did you want to open the floor for comments or?
yeah, let's by all means, let's have some feedback here. Yes.
Well, it's fun for the artillery, that's for sure. I wish I would have been able to bring more guns down, but we did have the one piece.
That's an observation, not to be a negative Nancy, but if an event's going to offer a breakfast as an enticement.
Yeah,
The Grand Tactical, that could have been perhaps handled a bit better. The logistics of getting the Saturday morning meal out was awkward to say the least, and what passed for breakfast on Sunday. Well, $35 insulin is a thing. But coffee and Dunkin' Donuts. It was a bit disappointing. I mean, if I'd known it was gonna be that, I wouldn't just plan to do my own breakfast, honestly.
No, it's fair feedback, and then there you have a site that hasn't run many events. And I think Connie counted on community groups staging that, and then their logistics were awkward to the point where. I started from the distance seeing the lineup and I didn't bother going over. I was happy with apples and. You know,
Last night's board.
Cliff bars or something I had
Gin
in
and
my
tonic.
box, yeah.
yeah, gin and tonic.
Ewan?
This is not necessarily a reference directly to Sackets Harbor, but in the general sense. I think moving forward, if we were to consider sites to host a GT, we as a community need to know that they have the capability of hosting such a large scale event. That if they host 18-12 events annually, but they'll fall small, that it's a considerable scale up in order to accommodate literally hundreds of people staying for an entire weekend. I know I've spoken to the staff about this at length, but it is something that I think we do need to take into consideration in the years ahead. Can they take on the challenge that is presented by a Grand Hack?
And even something as relatively basic as availability of porta potties and making sure that they're serviced, so they don't become a health hazard on Pleasant. I mean, I think there's room for dialogue between, say, Crown Forces staff and potential GT sites. Say, these are things that are of merit that you may wish to consider. I don't know how much of that already goes on, but
It does, and then generally speaking, for a new site, then we will do a site walk, Craig and I both traveled with Marty and Tammy representing the use, they're representing the US. We went, albeit 2018. And then quite frankly, a lot of the things we laid out got lost in the intervening years. But on the positive side, the fire pits were awkward. We might have been a little too overzealous representing our interests. Apparently, the Crown Forces had 80% of the fire pits and there weren't a whole lot for the US and Navy. But, but on the plus side, the site delivering firewood right to the fire pits. And I thought there was plenty of porta potties. I don't recall that being.
no, I didn't mean specifically on this.
In general,
It's
yeah.
in general, because there's been times where, from a reenactor's point of view, in my personal opinion, that there might not have been enough budget allocated towards maintaining the porta potties. So, I mean, it's unpleasant when you need to use the facilities and there's a pyramid.
Yes, and
That's
then,
unpleasant.
but sites listen, right? So for Erie in 2023, I think there weren't enough porta potties, they weren't serviced enough. Aaron took that feedback to heart, and there was far more porta potties this year and a more frequent service regimen. So yes, we don't just want a whole bunch of positives here. Let's hear about the warts and that stuff we can work on, and then your feedback, Kevin, you'll see in the next slide where I start talking about potential future sites and yourself as well, Ewan. So I appreciate the feedback. All right. Well, where are you? So for 2025, we're going to take a pause because of Waterloo. Waterloo is not as well attended as it was originally projecting to be, but still it's going to consume a lot of our time and attention. So 2026, we're looking at going back to Fort Meigs. We have we jockeyed the cycle a bit so that the calendar lines up for us. So that's why I'm talking about going back to the US, going back to Fort Meigs, which I think was the site of the very first Grand Tactical, which would have been, I don't know, somewhere like 2004. So long overdue to go back and support a great site. And we'll have the conversations with them about, it's already started. And then we'll build on that when I go there this year, talk to Marty and Tammy about what can we do that it's not just the usual Fort Meigs weekend with more people attending, right? Is there different battle scenarios? Is there different things we can do? More stuff to bring the reenactors, and the site is amenable to that. And then in 2027, I said tentative, but this is pretty much firmed up. You know, we talked to Peter Martin about this, and then much the same element. So with Fort George, we have confidence, and Fort Meigs, they'll give us anything we ask for or need. And then just like apparently it's been affectionately named the Battle of the Bike Path. You know, we'll find some different battle scenarios for Fort George, so it doesn't feel like the usual event. Yes, Ewan.
I think the two sites you have listed there are great sites that we have worked with for decades. We are very familiar with the staff and the team they have there, and those teams, more importantly, are very receptive to all specific requirements and needs. But I think I just want to emphasize the point that you just raised, that when we're working with established sites that have had a history of hosting large 1812 events, that they are willing and able to put on something that's distinct and unique for the Grand Tactical. Because we've all had Grand Tacticals at events, at sites that have hosted other events, but have just made basically a grander version of their traditional event. And regrettably, how disappointing that is for people who've made an effort to come out to the Grand Tactical, only to experience something that they have traditionally experienced in other years. But I personally feel Meigs and George is a great example of working again with sites that we have a strong relationship with, which is absolutely important when trying to put on a Grand Tactical.
Yeah, and then other potential sites, nothing's committed. They're Adolphus Town, you know, bearing your feedback in mind, Ewan, you know, no, but I personally visited the site and walked it on my way to Chrysler's Farm this summer, you know, and it is spectacular. You know, the beach area, the waterfront, you got proximity to communities, Napanee and Bath are very close by, so you got a lot of amenities. All the encampments can be in shade, but still, it's glorified, I don't know, trailer park, handful of cottages, but you know, I talked to Dave Smith about that. And I'm not sure if it's Loyalist Landing or Rev War. There's a big event there in June of this year, and I'll attend as a guest, or I've been invited to attend as a guest, so to see firsthand how the site sets up running an event, and then that'll give me more insights as to its future suitability. I didn't put it on here. Chrysler's Farm is another option in one of its years, but talking to Jim and some of the other people associated with the Friends there, it'd be nice to see our level of support increase, so we can see Chrysler as a bigger event. And then already kicking around ideas about increasing the battle scenario so that maybe it starts elsewhere in the site and finishes sort of in that gladiatorial amphitheater, but you know, let's test the strike, challenge the site a little bit more, making sure that they be ready when the time
There's
comes.
so much space to play in there, like we don't need to play in the same place all the time.
Exactly, and then also I talked to the administrator of the village, you know, and talked about possibly having the opportunity to.
Coolest battle ever.
Yeah, just one sec, James, I got a raised hand there, but I think a different wrinkle, they now have. It's the breed of horse, the Canadian or something, like they have them there, and it's a lot of money's come into the site to host this breeding stock. So they're a little bit sensitive around noise. So the site administrator said it's not a no, but just it has to be planned well in advance so that she can start working over their board and set the stage. So
Even without going into the village, there's acres.
absolutely, and it seems crazy not to use it, but Or the other thing, I'd love to see the public sitting out in the field in their lawn chairs and then maybe we can,
We can play in the shade?
yes.
Yes.
And, you know, attack up the hill. All right, you, in 1 sec, I got James has his hand up with a question.
Oh, I just wanted to comment on what some other people have brought up, and I know we have to work with at the sites that a lot of our battles or battle tactical scenarios are, for lack of a better word, beholden to the card carrying and cash paying public versus what some of us have experienced in other time periods where the battle scenarios are much more quote reenactor friendly. And I like where the discussion's going in the direction of let's try and get some long-term sites to work in a larger scale that way. Again, but we're always conscious of the public doesn't want to come out and complain that they didn't see anything. And that's about all I had to say on that.
All right, and then Ian had a comment in the chat. We got to remember as we do our future planning, the 250th of the Rev War is coming up, so there'll be some big events. But a caution there, and it's created problems for a lot of the fall events. It seems like a lot of that Rev War, they've moved away from summer months and they're starting to put a lot of their big events more in the fall when there's more amenable weather. So, I'm sorry, Jackie, did you have your hand up or?
No, I was just playing with something.
Okay, Ross,
Is that something we should consider?
we've talked to sites along with, does the feature battle always have to be in the absolute hottest part of the day? Right, so that'll be ongoing discussion, but I'll use that question as a prompt to encourage everyone to go look at the 2 videos I recorded with Rob McGuire around preparing for an event and dealing with heat stress, because they have remarkably few views. And don't just watch it yourself, encourage your unit to watch them.
Well, and some of the, and on that subject, some of the night battles at some of the events are not happening because we're not populating that event. Fort Niagara is one of them, where we do a battle in the peak of the day, but we could be doing the coolest battle ever that echoes between the castle and everything else. There's not enough of us present to make that happen. So some of those really cool battles that we're missing out on at nighttime is because we're choosing not to go to those events for whatever reason.
Ewan,
I was gonna ask in reference to Adolphustown, would you be able to speak to any previous events that have been there, just for the sake of the meeting?
For a naval army combined event, I can't think of a better site. And as Tom mentioned, there are beaches actually on both sides of the peninsula. And the peninsula isn't terribly wide, maybe 200-300 yards across. So you can land on the front or the back of the peninsula. We've done it many times with like bateau, and then had everyone pile ashore. It is the actual site, the original arrival of loyalist settlement here in this province. And so the last big one down there, not only did we land there, we actually had the descendant of Sir William Johnson, the first baronet of New York. I think it's like the 9th baronet king. And he and his wife were willing to get the bateau and go out and jump into the water and wade ashore. And it's his ancestor, Sir William, who established the precedent that Indigenous people should be treated as nations rather than as individuals. And therefore, all the treaty law we have to this day, and all those land acknowledgements you hear said at schools and public events, are all from that initial guy who was the superintendent of Indian Affairs in the 1760s. So to have his ancestor show up and land there, and of course, we then had quite a large Indigenous turnout. Like, I mean, the modern guys showed up and like welcomed him ashore and presented him with tobacco. And he had brought coronation coins from Britain here, big gold coins that he passed out to the Indigenous guys, sort of a reenactment of what his ancestor and their ancestors would have done. So Tom's right, there is sort of a permanent campground there. And some of the people camping there are there forever, I think. But it's not a trailer park in the sense of toothless, inbred people. But rather it's in the sense of like people in Winnebago who just always leave it there. Right? And so it's not like you're thinking of like a giant mobile home park forever. It looks more like a typical, yeah, they're not gonna shoot back. There's quite a bit of ground there, and then the other big point is if we want to organize and bring taller, like larger vessels as well. It's the ship canal going up to some cement plant further up. So every once in a blue moon, you see freighters going past the site too. So there's plenty of depth of water for that. They seem a very artillery friendly site. And so we were banging away like mad up and down the field. There's a bit of a roll to the peninsula too, so there's dead ground. So even you don't have to march a long way. And as Tom also pointed out, it's a very mature wooded area. So like no ground cover at all, but gigantic trees, so the whole place is in the shade, which is lovely too in the hot day. And because it's so far down Lake Ontario away from Toronto and so on, you can swim in the lake. It's clean water, so to speak. So
All right, we got, just checking the time, we gotta pick the tempo up. So really appreciate all the feedback. Mrs. Cinema, I got a different slide specific to that, but similar comment to Chrysler's Farm. I would like to see our participation at the event grow before we ever consider it as a grand tactical site, but with it being in October, it's hard to imagine a grand tactical that late in the season. That's kind of my opinion. So, all right, Chris, this is for you.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna spend very long on this because we're gonna keep going. This is our overall event schedule for 2025 season. It is, these events are posted on the Crown Forces site now. There's just a few things that I want to highlight that maybe are new to you. The Officer NCO School, Ewan's gonna come back to that in a second, but we have scheduled it at Fort York for April 26th and 27th, because April 27th is the Battle of York Day that they do there every year. So we're gonna try to tie into that a little bit, get some people for them. Jumping down the schedule a little bit, this is really nice. There is a weekend between Fort Meigs and Stony Creek this year, which is very unusual. That doesn't happen very often, but that will hopefully allow us to get a few more people at Fort Meigs as we build up for that GT there next year. Fort George is on the schedule for this year. And then I did want to also highlight our fall and spring. We did talk about moving events outside of that hot season. Our fall and spring are getting very, very busy. So if we are thinking about that, probably our two hottest events are usually Erie and George. There's not a huge amount of room for them to move into May or September. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly a conversation we can have, but I'm not sure there's a lot of room for that. I think I'm going to turn it back to Tom for a couple of other events before we jump to UN though, right? I don't know what this one is. Let's see here.
All right, so I'm going to speak to Sackix Harbor. Connie asked me to pass along. The Battlefield Alliance is willing to return to their annual event. So kind of people show up Friday, have Saturday, maybe a Sunday morning scenario or something, and then people can clear out by 1 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon. So stay tuned. I'm not sure the best way to pull that, but she asked for some feedback for weekend or date options when they might have that. New Orleans, unfortunately, I think they've run into some funding problems, so there's no event in 2025. I'm not sure going forward. You know, there's been new people and groups running that event, and they wanted to try to not repeat some of the issues from 2015, so they don't want to run an event until they do it properly. But, you know, there was some talk about them helping to underwrite the price of a coach or bus if we were going to have bus people again. And there was also a local reserve barracks that people could have access to stay in if they wanted a canvas-free experience. So stay tuned. We know the people there. Tim Strain is a friend to both Chris and I. If that gets rekindled, we'll share that. River Raisin, I had more people take me up on that, the best lunch on the circuit, so. You know, it's a very travel-friendly event. It really gets going late afternoon. Everything happens at the new visitor center, which is the old twin pad, the ice rinks. So that's where the museum and PS is, but there's no restrictions because they leased the land from the Battlefield Alliance, so we can have opposed line tacticals in the field next to the arena. The memorial service is now right outside of the building, so there's no marching down the street. All that wraps up a little bit afternoon, and then everyone scoots to their church ladies venue, and you get a plethora of soups, chilies, followed with ham and fried chicken and a bunch of other amenities. And then you're welcome to go home, or otherwise there's talks either at the visitor center or the local museum. Fort Malden, you know, they're bringing back their timeline event, the August long weekend. Chris and I traveled down there last summer, pretty laid back, casual event, but a lot of fun. So if people have an interest, then more 1812ers are always welcome there. Chrysler's Farm, we had a very good event this year. You know, the amazing thing was the lack of Americans. So we had what was it, 2 or 3?
2 actual, and I brought 1.
And then on a Sunday, a couple of the Forsyth rifles showed up, I think. But if we didn't have to cross units over to represent Americans, we probably would have had equivalent number of Crown Forces muskets to what we had at Stony Creek this year. So, you know, the attendance and support is constantly growing. And the site is incredible how hard they work to really look after the reenactors right down to the end of the day, Saturday, delivering beer rations to the camps. So.
Yeah. The kids enjoy the crises.
Mississinawa, no event this year. You know, they run into a problem with their other site. I didn't realize they only had access to it for a week a year. They leased it from whatever the Indiana equivalent is to the, you know, parks and wilderness or whatever. So using the time to reset, they actually have purchased a parcel of land. So it's theirs to own and to work all year long. Thad sent me this. It's a kind of a mock-up of what they think it's going to look like. He talked about the British camp having a special path to the parking lot or something. So for people that got to get away, it's easily done. So it'll be interesting to see as this develops. They've been communicating plenty with us. And just to give you an idea, the upper left, the old site, which was a little ways out of town, so I can't see it on my monitor up in this area. The new site you'll see is down just on the edge of town. So probably a little bit closer to the community. I went last year, but my first time back in decades and had an absolute blast. So it's
On the new site?
no, the new site hasn't been used yet. Its first time will be next year. They already set the dates for, I think they want to have those dates fixed in the calendar. They're no longer going to try to bounce back and forth with the Feast of the Hunter Moon, so that you can really plan around that, and also so they won't fall on Canadian Thanksgiving. So looking ahead, a possibility is 2026 perhaps. I'm not sure if you guys follow. It started with the Noofs out of Penetanguishene during the bicentennial. They had special kind of grave markers made, you know, to mark a War of 1812 veteran. You know, those are placed in a number of cemeteries. But then the Canadian Fencibles have really run with that. It's quite remarkable the work they have done, identifying graves all through kind of their area. Dave Smith has been very prominent in that. They constantly have a ceremony or several ceremonies on a given date. you know, to honor those veterans whose graves are there. But for those that don't know, Perth, Ontario was known as a military settlement. So whether it's veterans from the War of 1812 regiments, or also a number of Napoleonic regiments, they were relocated to Perth, given land grants, with the idea if there was ever something again, then there was high quality militia that could be immediately drawn apart. So there's tons of graves there. If you haven't been to Perth, I walked that this summer as well. Unbelievable, beautiful community. That's one of my own photos there. And, you know, we're talking about a British encampment in the main town park, and then having some ceremonies, and then the local community is getting kind of all wrapped up in hosting us. So, you know, it won't be battles, but it could be, for those interested, a very unique event in an incredible venue. So
Large Scottish community.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, you wouldn't be welcome. But
No Italians.
Before you said that?
Just, it was involuntary.
all right, let's look ahead to, if we can talk first on the training curriculum or training goals for 2025. Ewan has a bit, and then Matt as well. So, and then we'll morph into the small school. So.
Yeah, so the two big things that have been talked about is to continue to move forward from the light infantry school that was held in the autumn at Fort George. Playing with both the lights and the battalion and having them work in conjunction with each other in a way that is even more smooth than what we've traditionally done. So the idea is that we can utilize some of what was brought up at the school, you know, events. And for those units who just want to be in the line, blast away, how best that we can move the big red wall with the lights and the lights with the big red wall. And then the other thing that was brought up was the idea of, especially in regards to Fort Erie, deploying from column of companies into line. So that's going to be one of the other big focuses for next year.
All right, and then Matt.
My approach for the schooling this year was along the same lines, but to try and encourage a few more artillery to actually come.
Not just the school. Well, what's your training goals for the artillery through next year?
Beyond that, yeah, what I would be to, like I said, get more talent to the school. We can build on it, on the artillery structure, enhance the camp's authenticity. So we do have few family type camps forming in the big camp, so we got to try and make it so that we, you know, we have less beach towels and stuff hanging around and everything that goes swimming and stuff. Delegating more responsibility to the subalterns, so that's in the camp, but that's also for on the field, like we discussed earlier. We want to continue with the in-camp and the field drill sessions, so that when we call to do a noon gun, we incorporate some limber drill with that. Just to support the infantry and site staff in any capacity when possible. So even when it comes to the scripted scenario for that day, I believe with the sergeant's calls now, the artillery sergeants will come and attend with that. So that level of responsibility gets shared. Keep focusing on our safety. So our first aid kits, extinguishers, and the limbers are there. And we did talk quite a bit about the prevention. For instance, the whole thing about the heat, and the screen that was discussed at the NCO school last year. So we took that into the camp. So I had similar discussions and showed some of the paperwork, some of the stuff that was presented at the school in camp. Take that to the individual gun crews. Encourage participation on all different levels. And we will be anticipating higher operating expenditures regarding like the cost of powder and fuel and whatnot. So how we're dealing with that. And that's it pretty much. That's a lot there, but it's worth the attempt.
All right, and then officer NCO school.
The NCO school next year will be at Fort York. So Colin and I, sorry for all you guys having to come into Toronto. I apologize. Anyway, so Colin and I will do our best to accommodate everyone. As was indicated earlier, it is our commemorative weekend for the Battle of York. So for those who want to stay around on Sunday, as is tradition, we will offer a all-unit drill day. So for those units who want to bring in their rank and file to do some drill on the site, that would be greatly appreciated. So we'll help with animating the site on our anniversary date of the Battle of York. Thank you.
All right.
And one of the things that Chris and I have talked about, considering how well it went this past autumn, regrettably, I couldn't be in attendance, but the idea of hosting another advanced light infantry school for next year. So if Chris wants to add to that, but again, although I wasn't there, I was so happy to hear the feedback, the positive feedback from that event, as well as to see how many people were willing and able to come out for it. So it's something on a personal level I'd love to see continue to move forward. And if Chris has anything to add.
Yeah, so we just talked about probably we'll try to do that in the fall again. Just because the spring, I mean, the fall is busy as well, but after we did late October this year, and actually the weather worked out really well. So maybe we'll look at that again. But just I don't think there's time really to squeeze it in the spring as well. But yeah, just echoing what Ewan said, it was great. I think we had 5 different units send representatives, so it was great to have people willing to come and maybe learn something new or expand their knowledge, but also hopefully take that back to their groups and share it. And hopefully in April we can put that together with a larger battalion and really see some new things on the field next year. And one last thing, there were a couple new bugle calls that came up at the school. So my expectation, overstating that, my expectation would be that everybody kind of knows the basics now. I think that's most of us, but I would really love to add a couple more for anybody that's interested in doing light infantry. So allegedly, the bugler's coming to my house tomorrow, which I didn't know. We're gonna tape some more calls and we'll put them online. So if you want to learn those new calls, I think it'll just be 2 new ones. Yep.
I was just going to add too. I know some units, you know, it doesn't interest their membership to do this kind of work, but especially for those units made up of younger individuals who want to run around and scoot and shoot, it would be very important for them to attend these kind of opportunities.
So, and then I wanted to add, you know, not everything has to be done as a mob. You know what, if hopefully people know enough people outside of their unit that they feel comfortable going to something by themselves. You know, as an example, Andrew was there representing the 41st Regiment. So he could take the learning back to the 41st and the 41st can be employed in some light infantry situation. But, you know, if a unit has no one there, then it's going to be hard to utilize them in those sort of roles or scenarios. And then likewise with an event, you know what I've seen, you got, I'll call them the Lynn brothers from your group, like
They're the tourists, they'll go everywhere.
yeah, they know, they literally will go in
They're
there,
amazing.
and they'll dress as Noofs, they'll dress as Canadian Volunteers, whatever they have to do,
Yeah.
so they can participate.
And they
in the
will, so
event.
they can join any group. And the only reason they weren't at the light infantry school is they were at the ball doing their thing there.
Yes, that was poor planning on my part. I apologize.
Well, and I just want to throw it out there too, that IMAX starts their winter drill mid-January, every other Sunday in Brampton, well, not in Brampton, but at the Brampton Airport. And we're happy to have anybody who is local-ish. I mean, I know no one wants to drive 2 hours to go to a drill, but if you live there and your drill is 2 hours away from there, I mean, it's the same drill, right? Although, I mean, Richardson salts are particularly different than perhaps your drill masters are, but we definitely get a lot of work done and a lot of fine tuning done in that space that we're allotted.
Yeah, and on that note, I did make the 2 hour drive last year. And I think at this point last year, I said the same thing Tom said 5 or 6 years ago. I would love to come out and participate. I have a musket. Most of the time know how to use it still. So I'd love to come out and participate in drill sessions. And there were 2 units that invited me, so thank you, and 1 unit that I invited myself to. So thank you to those units that had me, but if anybody else is having drill, I'd love to come and join you. If you are a certain red face regiment, just for the future, I need more than 24 hours notice. Next time, I got an email on Friday night. Hey, we got drill tomorrow. You want to come? Maybe next time. That wasn't from you. That was somebody else.
Okay, for sure.
But no, I appreciate all the invitations, and yeah, I'd love to make as many as I can. So thank you.
All right, keeping this moving along, recruiting. I'll say this, go to our website, make sure your information's up to date. There is a unit contact with an email address that works. Because we do get inquiries through our universal recruiting portal, and that is what we use for the referrals. Also, I'm sure most of you have seen Ray Henricks Bow at events. He has a fly set up, says 1812 recruiting. If you don't know Ray, then visit with him at an event, make sure he understands your unit, its area of operations, and he has been extremely effective. He gets an inquiry, he walks them immediately over to that unit's kitchen and hooks them up with people. A lot of people have gained new membership through Ray's efforts at events.
He's got my group with you guys. And that looks like him.
So this abomination is what happens when you ask,
Wow.
when you ask AI to give me an image of Napoleonic era officers, right? But I'm gonna use that to introduce a concept. Greg started talking about it earlier, and that is that leaders have to lead, and that's the people in this room, also the NCOs in your unit. And I'll point to an example. Sackix Harbor, that morning scenario, I think we had 4 or 5 people had to drop out. And I beat myself up. I thought, did we not warn people enough that it was going to be long and arduous, that you were going to need a lot of water, that and then as the day goes on, and I'm starting to hear stuff like, well, this one guy was in his 80s, he hadn't been to a reenactment in over 20 years. This guy is undergoing chemotherapy treatments. This guy just started a keto diet and his body hadn't been reacting well to it. Like I started going through all this stuff. And I'm thinking, why on earth are these people on the field? Right. And then I took a much more aggressive stance over that lunch break, talking to unit commanders and saying, whether it was those people or others that I knew were on precarious footing, and saying, they're not going out this afternoon. We're not going to have a repeat of that. But I really, really need you guys to know the people in your unit and be prepared to have a tough conversation. Like, it might be on a specific day, it's really hot, you don't seem to be doing well, I want you to sit this one out. Or you struggled in the afternoon, you're not gonna do the long march at Fort Erie and then go back out in the heat and humidity again in that long scenario.
Well, and it's not just age or dealing with health issues, long-term health issues. It could be somebody showing up that morning and they've only had a cup of coffee in their system, and now you're expecting them to take the field. I mean, we have to look at it from all angles, because heat exhaustion can affect anyone if they're not prepared for it.
And it's safety too, though. We lost a new member at Stony a couple of years ago because he showed up late, didn't come for the drills in the morning, and they expected to be in the battle in the afternoon. We said, can't do that. He said, oh, well, I won't do it at all then. And I said, well, that's fine. So, I mean, you have to, for the new commanders here, it can be awkward sometimes, but you just gotta do it. So.
Well, you get promoted in a role. It is a meaningful role. It's not ceremonial. You don't get to buy a fancy uniform and swan about and pose for all the pictures. You have the responsibility of a whole bunch of people in your camp. the soldiers, but also the followers and the
kids.
children. Like if you're the commanding officer, or you're the senior NCO, they are all your responsibility that weekend. And then I'm gonna transition to another one, succession planning. So you've kind of seen it in action with our staff structure. You've seen it with Ewan's announcement and how we're going forward with the posting. You know, talking about what the job requirements are, the role description, and what's the process for applying for that. But I talked last year about this. I need this to start occurring at the unit level. You know, we've had examples where some units have aged out and disappeared. You know, and I think that's just a tremendous loss when you look at the history that those units are perpetuating. You know, proud units that served in Canada, that made a lot of sacrifice. You hate to see any of these things go away. So ongoing recruiting, but also the right structure. So I'm going to force the conversation a little bit. I'm going to send you a form I want you to fill out. So talk to me what your current structure is. You know, who's the commanding officer? How long have they been in the role? How long do they anticipate remaining in that role? Likewise, with your senior sergeant, corporals you might have, but also importantly, you know, a lot of units, they have a separate corporate executive chair and a separate on the field commander. So let's identify who they are and then kind of what we think their shelf life is, and then project ahead, you know, future roles. So if you see the right-hand side of the page, you can identify the time frame. Are you thinking 2 years, 5 years down the road? But what does it look like? You know, if you're a commanding officer and you're anticipating stepping aside, is your sergeant older than you? Like, are they really going to be still active in the hobby down then? If you think you have an issue, then start identifying the corporals that you think are more likely to move into that sergeant's role, and then start giving them more responsibilities at events. First step is kind of identifying candidates and who you think has the potential. And then the next step is to give them opportunities, responsibilities to start to build those skills so that when the time comes, they're ready to step in and it's seamless. So, Ewan.
I was just gonna add too, when you're giving these, hopefully these opportunities to these members, keep in mind that they might approach things a little different than you do, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? They need to grow in their own role. They will leave their own mark on that role. So even if you are you hold on to not Powell, but you're a bit of a micro.
That's me. That's perfect.
That's great. You're a bit of a micromanager. All right, that's fine, but you got to give them that liberty to kind of grow in that role. So if you give them those opportunities, let them use those opportunities to really get a sense of what they're going to be in that role. Might not be the way you envision it, but it is necessary, I feel, for the survival of some units.
Good. Tom, sorry, do you require like any sort of explanation too, as far as like, I know that you kind of touched on the organizational kind of structure of each unit, because that sometimes plays a role too. Did you, like, when we fill this out, did you want a sort of an explanation about how that runs?
There's a section at the bottom for notes on both sides.
Yeah, okay.
So you can.
And do we have to know the starting dates? Oh, when we started the dates in those roles. Okay, never mind. I got it. I'm simple sometimes.
Reading is important.
I'm a better teacher than student.
Reading,
Thank you, LeVar.
reading comprehension is more important.
But not if you're president.
All right, I'm going to, under leaders lead, touch on another subject. And then it's from one of my favorite HBO series, Generation Kill, where the grooming standard come up a lot. I think it's like flow awkwardly. I think the audio is probably going to come off my computer, so I don't know if Chris hits play at the same time as me. I'm ready to go.
Oh, this is the mustache. Yeah.
My first life story, I expect all y'all keep them clean shaven. That's what we just been through. Okay, lots can go wrong out here. Like bakery, cold cow. Like a pussy, But the one thing these men can count on is the grooming standard. I believe it always ought to be there for it. That's my next place, sorry.
Okay.
Why does that sound like Letterkenny?
No, that's
That's Squirrely Jam, wasn't it?
So I think the few years we've been through, we've been more focused on getting people coming back and being comfortable coming back. But I just, and I say this with some trepidation because I don't want my comments and opinion to chase anyone out of the hobby. Right, but you know, when I was a member of the 41st, the unit had a standard, you know, and that was no facial hair. You know, that was a unit standard and goal, and then likewise, you try to work around modern sunglasses, and then you had standards for the uniform, you know, and then how it would be worn, you know, when if you're not in uniform, unless the weather is extreme, then you wear a barracks coat. So I think now that we're comfortably back, then we need at the unit level to start talking about the proliferation of beards I see on parade, modern eyeglasses, especially photo gray, you know, so they're walking around with something that looks like sunglasses. So I don't want anyone to leave. And some people have medical needs for their eyewear and that, but just aspirationally, if units and individuals can always be looking for where and how within their budget, they can upgrade their impression, then I think that's a good thing to do. But I think that comes from the units and not us as staff, as an edict, so.
Yeah, it's gotta be a buy-in. It's like, again, for those of us who are teachers, like you've gotta have the class buy-in, so their input is important. But then it also helps create a culture, because I have to say that I don't very often, I do once in a while, but I don't very often have to step in and talk about historical inaccuracies or anachronisms or whatever, because the guys and the girls, they enforce it. They're like, whoa, man, you gotta change that up, or then, because it's part of the culture of the group. We're teaching the public about the history, right? We're not just doing the battlefield stuff. And I think it's important that we aspire to be as accurate as possible. And I mean, I wear a beard year round, but I always shave, but that's just me. And I'm not like, because, I shave it for the events because I want to be that person to be able to portray as realistic as possible the event. That being said, I mean, some of the beards that are out there, if we're going to talk about, I got a beard, so guys with beards, I'm with you. But again, we have like the long Civil War goddamn beards have to go. I'm sorry, they drive me nuts. We can only have so many pioneers in a regiment or a battalion or something like that.
But we don't. That's the problem.
Well,
Something that's bugged me for years.
and it's
that
the
is-
French pioneers who have the beards, really. I don't like, anyways.
No, the British pioneers left before they in the morning before they were shaved, which is why they ended up with beards. We have people that have beards that could be pioneers. We don't have anybody actually wanting to be a pioneer.
Excuse
Well,
me.
and that's what-
The light company and the Grenadier Company of the Royal Scots both have apron grenadier, great
But
apron
so
pioneers.
But they're not. They're in the line. They should be pioneers.
They're in the line because we don't,
Be
that's because Ground Forces Ground Forces Command has not created pioneers yet, because we're just getting organized.
Sorry, that's, yeah, believe me, you had something to say.
Thank you, Andrew.
This will never be
Thank you.
pioneers.
Okay, few things. To honor my father really quickly, I'd love to form a brigade of pioneers at some point.
Yeah.
So in the honor of Roland Waddle, but anyway, really quickly, it's very important for us as officers and NCOs to set the standard, set the example, right? So if we are turned out well, if we are deported properly, it sets the example for others to look to us as the example that they will follow, right?
It's a good thing I get a copy for all of my men every morning to make sure that I present a clean shaven face. And I
Bingo.
take my
And you are spectacular.
So that their face can also be.
And then on top of something else that Greg said about teaching, opportunity to work with the public to get the public to know about the past we are representing. Also keep in mind, we are representing actual historical regiments that served in the defense of British North America. Some of these regiments are still recognized to this very day within the British Army and within the Canadian Army. So we are doing a disservice to those men who actually wore these uniforms if we are not wearing them properly. Let me just
And it's more than beards, exactly. It's uniforms as well. So we're gonna let the cat out of the bag. It's true. We gotta wear them.
Even if we are representing British regulars, we're representing militia regiments, but there was a military standard, and we will never be able to 100% represent these regiments. Like I'm far bigger in many ways than they would have been 200 years ago. But how you dress, how you deport yourself is important, and it pays homage and respect to those who historically wore the uniform.
So overall, it's very good, but there's opportunity for improvement. And I think just like we're not gonna make someone travel to the US, we're not gonna make someone shave a beard or not wear their glasses. But just individuals, units have aspirational goals for improve where you can improve. And then to me, that's a win. And then some comments online, I think they're a little bit of fun. Dunvegan, they'll put our pioneers to work. Fourth Regiment as a pioneer, let's build some corduroy roads. And
Yeah.
Jonah was laughing at that, so there you go.
The pioneers would be front of me. No one's been in front of me.
Well, if you want, we can detach pioneers from their units and have them out.
They don't want you behind you. They want you.
And we can be more conscious of where we can have some obstacles for them to go out and destroy, et cetera.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, Jordan Kemp,
He does a great part there.
he does a great impression. He like to beat the shit out of anything he gets in his way.
Not just the yellow tape.
so ask everyone to remember, we're recording this and it's gonna be published. Chris,
So maybe simpler than beards is keeping an eye on sort of our camp streets too. That's something that's, you don't have to tie somebody down and shave their beard, right? You can just say, hey.
But you could.
Could you tuck that chair away, or the lantern stands are coming back into the streets again at a unit level, but in theory we should be able to march down those streets, right? So it's sort of getting a little lax. So maybe you guys can have a conversation at your unit level, and again it's we set the standards and people will follow, right?
And peer pressure and impression shaming can go a long way.
But no, but it's, when I said about culture, it's true. Like, I mean, we have one guy in our unit who has a mustache, and he wears it, I think, for, he's got a physical issue, but I mean, his nickname is Harry. And the pressure, I mean, it's a friendly pressure because these are all friends and they all enjoy their company and stuff. So it has an influence. I mean, it has an influence on them, and I don't have to say very much. It's just about having the right people kind of showing by example, and then it kind of falls into line. I understand it's a volunteer. I understand this is a hobby. We volunteer. We don't get paid to do this. We choose to do this. So I mean, I always kind of have to hold them back, saying, "Okay, take it easy. There's only so much we can do." But it's got to be a balance, I think.
all right, we're getting ready to move on, but James, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just didn't want to interject to it. It's hard to do it from the screen here, but following in the line of thought, the flags in camp. I know I've had complaints leveled to me about flags within our smaller camp, and that's something where we're massaging into groups that aren't used to hauling down Union Jack because they think they're on a ship. But I did notice, including at the filming event that some of us, or probably all of us, took part in, there's a number of little flags showing up on the top of people's wedge tent poles in camp. I saw a couple at the Grand Tactical. I saw like at least two at the filming event. Yeah, and I know I've always been told there's only one camp flag, right? That's usually you're near the parade square, whatever it is, regardless of how proud people may be of their individual unit.
Good one, we'll include that, and then unit commanders, that's part of your managing your groups, right? Ideally, should be camp colors only that mark the boundaries of your tent line, so, yeah.
Pennants are acceptable, like kind of,
What's that?
like pennants, like we have a little.
Camp colors, all acceptable.
Camp, no, it should be the only thing we see, and then it
Yeah,
is
okay.
it's in the dress code, dress orders. They have the dimensions for what a camp color is, what it should look like, and what the length of the pole is. So if you need help identifying that, we can share that information.
And regimental colors, are we talking about those as well, not being out in the street?
So for me, as a colonel of a regiment, and knowing the fundraising and effort that went into creating those colors, I would only bring them out when it was necessary on parade. It's kind of a vanity thing. I think to fly regimental colors outside the commanding officer's tent, and personally, I just didn't like doing that. Yes, Ewan.
Well, I was gonna say, and I feel as a battalion, as Crown Forces, we've done a really good job of making sure everyone that do have battalion colors, that they get equal opportunities to then be showcased on the field and in front of the commander's tent. So if you have regimental colors and you want them to be displayed at events, talk to Chris, talk to Tom, and we can make that happen.
That's cool.
Okay, coming down the home stretch. Scott, can you remind everyone, update them on the Meritorious Service Award?
Yeah, so the Meritorious Service Award for 2025, the nomination deadline is the end of this month. So if you haven't sent it to me or filled it out online, by all means do that. I've gotten a number of them already, and it's great to read them. It's
What's the deadline again? Sorry.
end of November.
And I'm guessing online
On the Crown Forces
criteria.
website, yeah, and it explains the criteria, and the form to fill out is there, or you can download the form and email it directly to.
Thanks.
Just like an ADC, quick and easy, so.
Get us back on the surfboard.
Quick, okay?
More.
So feedback from sites. We are still being challenging submitting registrations in a timely fashion. In fact, I think it was Fort Erie, Aaron was telling me as we were setting up Friday night, registrations were still coming in, right? So sites need that information well in advance. That's how they plan for the right amount of porta potties, the right amount of firewood, the right amount of minerals that they provide at breakfast or whatever they should. I think we did well, working where we could, incorporating standardized morning meeting schedule, so officers call, the sergeants call, and then units can have a chance to do their daily orders. So we'll work with that as much as possible, and then also try to avoid the great big gab fest that sites seem to like to have, where everyone and their mother shows up, but we might have to balance. We win one day and give them what they want the next day, so we all know where the ice and firewood and stuff is, so. We went back this year to asking for unit strengths prior to an event. The feedback was, well, don't you get that information in the registrations? Not always. We don't often see that. And then we have our own planning to do prior to an event, as we see unit strengths, then we can start thinking about what units can stand on their own. They have sufficient numbers, who has to be combined. Let us do the combining rather than you guys playing Hoover and scooping up guys to make your units big. Like we're trying to balance, pretty uniform size blocks of troops that we can move on the field. I think that worked really well this season. So, and rather than in the past, like we had 4 or 5 man units out there, it just, with a sergeant and an officer, that just got unwieldy. Reminder, no wall tents in the British regulars camp. That's not new. That's been a long-standing regulation. If someone feels they need a wall tent for their personal comfort, then they're gonna have to set up in the militia camp.
But please don't set up first in the middle of nowhere. And make us look-
Well, that's the militia don't wanna come under Ryan's control to do their own thing, but.
We can handle it, but as long as someone else is parked in the middle of where they fire.
You're touching on another pet peeve. Unload the car, move the vehicle, then set up. And then at the end of the event, don't park your car in the middle of the street and then start packing stuff up and loading the car, like. Well, man, let's manage the traffic in and out of
Our
the
kid
camps.
actually does a good job of saying, I'm gonna come in first, I'm coming in this way, you come in here, we coordinate that.
So we have lots of time to observe the Sunday pack up because generally we're the last ones to be able to get our vehicles in. So we sit and wait and watch. So kitchens, I'm not going to go too deep into that subject just yet, but a watch out. Our kitchens seem to be getting more and more elaborate with storage tents, maybe multiple flies, the furniture in there. So let's think about what an army on campaign realistically would have had.
That would be nothing.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Ammunition boxes, stumps or logs, etc. Right? So
you're actually.
Well,
Yeah.
cooking in the streets, which we can't do, so.
yeah.
The kitchens are an accepted anachronism, but the point is taken.
Well, kitchens were dirt ovens, right? They would manufacture them in multiple units would probably, or companies would share that. But not too many sites are gonna allow us to bring a excavator in and create those, so. This is a reinforcement for what we talked about last year and went through enforcing this year, and I think people did a good job. Even I trained myself for safety inspections to look for them where I was a little bit lax. No one mentioned at Bacchus, I showed up without a hammerstone, but they're in the standing orders. Let's make sure your unit members have a flash guard and a hammerstone. Right? Even if the hammerstall's in their pocket and they can point to the fact that, or put it on for the inspection. Yes, Yon.
Well, and just to reiterate, these are coming from the expectations of often the sites that we are at. So it's part of our standing order, but keep in mind, this is a requirement when we're at Fox Canada sites, for example.
And it came up a couple times this year. Once around frequency of artillery fire, another time around hammer stalls where someone was so vehemently against it, they refused to take the field if they were gonna be forced to put one on. And I think Chris had a really good answer to this. But we all have said we're embracing the Parks Canada regulations as our safety standard. So heaven forbid, if there should ever be an accident, and then there's an investigation and then legal action, how do we explain that what we say we're employing as our safety standards and regulations, that we have selectively decided that we're not going to conform to one of them? Like that's gonna put us at risk across everything, right? So if someone's looking for a deviation, there is no wiggle room. Like we've all agreed, so this is our standard, this is what we're gonna follow, then we have to comply. All right, a couple other things. I don't know if we can combine it. This came up last year, but nothing really ever come of it when I followed up with the individual that lifted it up, but units, we focus a lot on the unit commanders, but units all have corporate affairs, different ways they manage themselves. Unit bylaws, are they registered as a not-for-profit, or some are charities or not? But there was a question, like, can we bring together these corporate officers and share best practices and ideas and or even talk about things that are problematic and then see if there might be solutions out there. So we'll try floating that up somewhere during the off season. I don't know that there is all that much. But then another one was, I think Greg lifted this up. It'd be kind of interesting to bring officers together and talk about what's the best practices on being an officer? You know, and then we have some newer people in roles, we might have some longer term people, we could benefit from their experience. Maybe they can take some ideas from what's being shared, but yes, you.
During the NCO meetings, one of the things I've come to really appreciate is just how much transition has occurred since prior to the pandemic. We have a lot of new people in their current roles. And even if they are still in a supervisory capacity, the capacity they're currently in is different from the one they were in 2019. So I think this is a very good point from Tom, and this is something that I personally would want to see.
All right, thank you. And then the last one, we carried it over from last year, and I don't know, we did a whole lot, but we've had calls out before for officer of the day and had no real takers on that. Well, maybe we have a sergeant managing a camp guard. There are units that have younger membership for whom an event's boring, there's not enough going on. And then maybe that's something they can do, and we have people that prefer to take the downtime between scenarios to recuperate and cool down, and which is fine too. But for those that want a higher degree of activity, then let's, weather permitting, put them to work. So
When I was in charge of the camp guard, the second work was really good for that, and they appreciated your guidance, so thank you.
but I'm also conscious of, you know, and that's why I say weather permitting, where I've seen a unit burn themselves out, like animating the siege works at Fort Erie, and then not be able to go out for a battle because they were heat exhausted, you know, so we're gonna have to balance that. And then finally, I believe, if I was to caption this, what I was saying, all right, we're done here, let's go get a beer, so. So thank you for your time, participation, the meeting run a little bit longer than expected because we had good feedback, participation throughout. And then on an ongoing basis, thank you everyone for their leadership, right? We're only as good as we operate as a collective, right? So it's hard to explain to an outsider what we do. I say it's kind of like a coalition of all these little clubs come together and put together something really big and magnificent, and that comes largely on your backs, you know, and the leadership you do managing your units and making sure this big thing works together. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, for the onliners, I'm going to shut this off. Thank you for your participation. Hopefully it was worthwhile. And then for everyone, I'm probably going to take the recording. I think
Thank
for the
you.
most part, there was nothing too contentious and then upload it in the YouTube channel so it's available to everyone.